Hello, I'm Nick Lodato, and this is part one in our series on accessibility planning. It's on background. Now, what we plan on covering today is to define ICT accessibility, to give some statistics about accessibility, and to answer the question why it matters. In subsequent episodes, we'll deal with institutional accessibility aspirations, standards. We'll give a framework and methodology for looking at accessibility. We'll deal with accessibility responsibilities and with the components of an ICT program and plan. So to begin, ICT is an acronym that replaces the old acronym of EIT, Electronic Information Technology Accessibility. Um, and basically, what this definition says is that pretty much everything that's electronic uh, that involves information and data, whether it's to create it, to convert it, to move it, to store it, to manage it, all those things encompass what we call ICT accessibility. Now, we're concerned about people with disabilities and their ability to access ICT or electronic information. That includes visual difficulties like low vision or blindness, audio and speech um, disabilities, motor disabilities, and cognitive disabilities. Now, I want to give a few statistics. These were compiled by a company called Blackboard, the creator of learning management system that led the pack for decades, beginning in 1998. Blackboard has a relatively new product called Ally that's taken a big role in evaluating and addressing accessibility, especially in learning management systems, but also in websites in general. And Blackboard released this info chart that I want to go over a little bit. And the death to me of a PowerPoint presentation is, I know you can't read this, but well, I'm going to focus on each of these quadrants, um, the four quadrants. On this slide, we're just going to mention that 16% of North American students with disabilities earn college degrees. That's not a great number to be proud of. I have the URL there for you to sort of follow up on this. Now, four kinds of disabilities that are addressed in the Blackboard info chart. Visual disabilities first. These are sensory challenges that make it difficult for people to perceive visual content. And we see about 3% of the population with visual disabilities. When students have these disabilities, we need to provide them with some sort of text-based alternative to the visual content. Hearing disabilities, these disabilities make it difficult to perceive auditory content. And again, we need to provide an alternative in the form of captions, transcripts, or other alternatives to audio. About 5% of the global population have hearing difficulties. There are physical difficulties and disabilities. These are uh, motor and muscular control that make it very difficult to use technology. Some people, for instance, cannot use a mouse, and a mouse has become the primary means of interacting with computers. So you need to develop systems that can respond to assistive technology that can be navigated by the keyboard only. 4% of the global population have those kind of disabilities. And finally, there are cognitive disabilities that that are neurological in source, and they make it challenging to understand and process information. What we need to do to address these issues are to provide people with multiple modes of of information gathering and to clean up the interface and make it clutter free. About a quarter of the global population have some form of cognitive disability. That's a pretty impressive number, pretty big by what I would have guessed. Um, some more statistics from Blackboard: a billion people worldwide. The thing that's most striking to me about this is that 60 to 80% of graduates, undergrads in North America, do not disclose their disabilities. So basically, they grin and bear it and suffer along with materials that are not necessarily doing the job for them. The other big news is the cognitive disabilities. So a few more, and then we'll move on. The Centers for Disease Control has published statistics as well on accessibility. This is 2018 data that indicates that about a quarter of the population above 18 or above, have some form of disability, and only three-fourths have no disability at all. And those disabilities can take the form of issues with independent living, with self-care, 5% with visual disabilities, 12% with mobility disabilities, 6% almost with hearing disabilities, and I'm blocking the number on cognitive. So, why does this matter? Well, with a fourth of the Americans with some sort of disability, this clearly impacts many, many people. It's our goal, our aspiration, and our duty to provide equitable access to not just education, but also job opportunities. These things need to be fair, they need to be equitable. And with 25% of the country having some form of disability, our learning materials, our instructional materials, the materials that interact with people need to be accessible. As a matter of fact, it's the law. So there is a federal law requiring that technology be accessible in higher education. It's enforced at many different levels. And perhaps, uh, to me, the most compelling reason for making your materials is the equitability issues. But in reality, you can be subject to lawsuits and complaints that can be very costly. One of the clients I worked with was cited and had to redo their entire mathematics curriculum as a result of having math software that was not accessible. They also needed to go through this whole analysis of their entire system. They needed to make restitution to the particular student that complained, and um, they needed to create training opportunities for faculty. So it's a very expensive financially and time and operationally issue when you do not meet accessibility guidelines. I think there's another sort of positive take on it as well. It's difficult to make materials accessible. It's costly. It takes some effort, but it does give you benefits beyond the one-fourth of the students who may need it. It actually, I believe, if you do it right, makes your content better. It makes it better able to communicate. It makes it better instructionally. It makes it more effective. So there are a lot of positive reasons for addressing accessibility. And of course, there are the negative ones like the lawsuits, which can be very troubling. So that's all we have today. It's an introduction. Next time, we'll get into the details about what accessibility is. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the series.